A little while back, I did testing on 204p on this Spyderco Sprint Run Domino. I did the testing because I noticed in use that this knife was showing edge retention that wasn't consistent with what I expected 204p to have. CTS-204p is said to have similar edge retention and performance to S90V, and that's not what I was seeing. I was seeing blunting on the apex pretty quickly through very little use. I tried resharpening the knife, I tried using different finishes on the knife, and nothing was seeming to make a real big difference. It seemed like it was happening too fast. So eventually I decided to test the knife and document the testing and post it. In that test I tested it against S90V, and I also included ATS-34 and LMAX. In the test the knife showed significantly lower performance than S90V. It was more on par with ATS-34. After the test, on the advice of Cliff Stamp, I decided to send the knife into Spyderco for warranty. After sending it in and talking to them for a bit, they agreed to do a Rockwell test on the knife. They did the Rockwell test, and the knife came out within their range of acceptability. So it wasn't under-hardened. And I was really surprised by that, and they asked me what I wanted to do at that point, and I wasn't sure. This went on for a little bit, and eventually I ended up on the phone with Eric Glesser. He called me on the phone. We talked about the tests, we talked about steel, we talked about testing in general. One of the things he said was he couldn't validate the test that I had done, simply because he wasn't here to see it himself. He wasn't here to see how the cutting was done and how the knife was sharpened, and I understand that. I understand that that needs to be the position that he takes, and that's fine, that's reasonable. But again, he asked me, what do you want to do about it? And again, I wasn't sure. But I said to him, I'm not angry, I'm not making demands. If you don't want to do anything, if you just send the knife back to me and that's it, I'm not going to say anything about it. That'll be the end of the issue, and that would be fine. So we kept talking that night, talked for a good bit, and at some point in the conversation I said that it was important to me to get another knife in 204p and test it, and if I could get different results, if it showed a significant difference in performance, post that, because what I'm saying in the last test is pretty far off of what most testers get when they're testing 204p. So when I said that, Eric said, well, why don't we send you another knife in 204p and you can test it and we'll go from there. And I said, you know what, that would be great, let's do that. So I figured he was going to send me a mule in 204p. What he ended up sending me was this. This is Spyderco Southard in CTS-204p. When I got this knife, I was blown away by, I was blown away by the fact that he called me. I was blown away by this knife, and it was above and beyond generous, and I was just very impressed by the entire situation. So I got the knife, I reprofiled it to 30 inclusive. I sharpened it the same way as I had done before, diamond out through ultra fine on the stones for the sharp maker. Took it through the strops, 3 to 5 micron, half micron, quarter micron, tenth of a micron. The knife in S90V that I used for the test was this Spyderco Yojimbo 2 Sprint Run in S90V. Also 30 inclusive, sharpened the same way. In the test, I used a small portion of the blade. I taped off the part of the blade that I wasn't using. The cardboard that used was the same as before. It was 5-inch pieces, 5-inch cut. It was push cutting. The results of the test for blunting, for visual blunting on the apex, was S90V began to show blunting at high 50s, low 60s. For 204p in this test, the blade began to show blunting at high 30s, low 40s. Bit of a difference there in that result. However, for the sharpness, which was determined by when the knife would stop shaving arm hair, for the sharpness, S90V stopped shaving hair after 74 cuts. 204p stopped shaving hair after 72. That's really close. That's a really close result. And it's a big difference. It's a big difference in performance between the Domino and the Southard. So I'm really glad that Spyderco and Eric Glesser was willing to send me another knife to test. It was really great of him to be willing to do that. On the Southard, it's a really impressive knife. It's one that I hadn't had before, and it's done really well. Ergonomics are great on it. The blade geometry, fairly thick spine, but the blade thins out pretty quickly. Before reprofiling the knife, I measured with digital calipers, and just behind the shoulder of the bevel, I got a consistent 0.45 millimeters. So it's a pretty heavy hollow grind, and it happens pretty quick on the blade. Consequently, the knife it's not a slicer. It doesn't have the performance of the Domino. Yeah, it doesn't have the geometry. The geometry of the blade doesn't lend itself to slicing. But for everyday use, regular carry, the Southard is that blade geometry is fine. The flipper, when Spyderco does the flippers on these, there's little nuances, little details to getting the flipper right, so that you can use the knife, use the flipper over and over again, and not end up wearing down your fingertip, not end up getting sore from it. Spyderco consistently gets that right in flippers, and yeah, other companies don't. I've dealt with knives from other companies where they didn't get it right, and you get the knife and you're playing with it and playing with it, and after a small amount of time, it wears you down. The jimping up here on the blade and back of the handle is it's fine. It's not overly aggressive at all. It's just enough. Open pillar construction. The clip is a little bit sharp, but that's fine. I can live with that. This cutout in the handle, I've heard people talk about these corners being sharp. It doesn't bother me. It's not a big deal. It doesn't, when you're holding a knife, it doesn't get your finger at all. So it's a beautifully executed knife and a damn good design, and I'm really appreciative that that Eric Glesser and Spyderco was willing to send it to me. Interesting thing about the test, interesting observation, was when the blunting happened relative to when the sharpness went away. With 204p, the blunting became visually apparent at around the halfway point of the lifespan of the sharpness of the knife. With S90V, you couldn't see the blunting until much closer to the end of the lifespan of the sharpness. You know, with S90V, once you saw the blunting there, once you could see it, it wasn't much longer before the sharpness was gone. With 204p, you had a lot more time after you initially noticed the blunting, and it was the same with the last time I ran the test, and I think with LMAX as well. And I'm not sure if that's because of the microclean process or a finer grain structure, but it's interesting, and it's something that I'd like to delve into more if I can at some point.